There is a second part to this, Constantine added. And here it was. Constantine was going to offer her a substantial concession, for what he was about to ask was going to be risky, was going to provide him with valuable intelligence. Aethelstan, he said simply. When you have finished in debut bath, I need you to visit Gloucester. Again, Eswi, Phelim and Engus will accompany you. Gloucester, Osrith repeated, and suspected she knew why already. It was where Aethelstan had grown up, and still lived. Aethelstan was Edward's eldest son, with a fierce allegiance to Mercia through Ethelfled, and had been taught warriorship by Eutod. Constantine was right to make a study of this young man, for Aethelstan had the makings of Alfred, and if he had the makings of Alfred, he was likely to have his ambition. And his ambition may not limit his desires for kingdom subjugation to the Saxon lands. Men are asking about Edra, Constantine asked. She is nearly the age to marry. What blood family did she have? And it struck Osrith then, that she knew very little about the girl's real heritage. Her grandparents were burned in a fire, her mother too. Of her father, Bilke was an orphan. When Thyra died, he moved from town to town as Ethelhelm began taking control of Edward's affairs. She could marry one of the Uineel princes, Constantine mused. Donchada has sons now, I could invite them here, to assess they are suitable. Flancina is getting old, and has no other sons to turn. It is Donchada or Domnall, or Neil after him, although Domnall has already been High King, and abdicated in favour of his father-in-law. The direct Uineel line will end with Neil, for he and Gormalath have no issue, and Donchada and his line will be on the ascendancy. Osrith felt her mouth fall open. Domnall, her dear friend, had been High King? That meant, he had had to have been King of the Aelch, of the Uineels. Flancina had had to have left the throne, or been pushed out, for that. She glanced in the direction of Constantine's throne, and at the parchment she had stolen, temporarily. Was that what he was telling his cousin? Domnall has been king? And suddenly, Osrith missed her friend, who she had walked with and been close with, when he had been exiled in Alba from Arian, and knew at once the sadness Edra would feel now she was going to be kept from Ildub. These last years, Constantine nodded. Flancina went to exile in the southwest, and Domnall continued to expel Norse in the same manner. Very successfully, I may add. Domnall is the reason I have intelligence about the Norse leaving Irian. But he is no longer king? On agreement that Flan named Donchada or Neil as king after him, he allowed Flan to return. He was a good king, well respected, just. But it did not suit him. He felt he could never live up to Flan's or even his father's rule. Constantine sighed. If Muir had lived a little longer, she might have instilled something in him. He made for a king which gave stability to Ulster, even the Allied bowed to him, and not just because someone was pushing their necks. Osrith nodded. Domnall always had that streak of self-doubt. Whether it was because he was the eldest and people assumed he was going to be king after Findlaich, his father, or for another reason. It was a pity. But it also meant that other great men were to follow Flan, people she had once known. Still dispelling the Norse. Dispelling them into the northwest coasts of Mercia and Northumbria. She is part Saxon, part Dane, Osrith said. And I have a name. Anlaf. Anlaf. Osrith said the name. The man who you are encouraging to take Eofuic. We have furthered agreements to one another, Constantine told her. He will never infringe north of the wall, and I will ensure that none of my men incur into that part of Northumbria. Your cousin keeps Bibbenberg and his lands, and the lands to the wall become part of Pitland once again. Apart from one stretch of land. But Osrith's mind was racing on, and she had not picked up on his subtleness. As far as possible, I wish for her to make her own choice, Osrith said. If it were up to her parents, well, I cannot say. Bilke was a stout Christian priest, yet he indulged Thyra a good deal of her own culture. And Ildub. I have already instructed Ildub to spend more time on governance, he will be a priest after me, when Selark takes the throne. Both schooled in kingship, Osrith noted, approvingly. A king may never know if or when he will need his spare. They are not to go off together any longer. Like us? Osrith murmured. We are the wiser for our mistakes, Constantine murmured. I am glad we can be allies, Osrith, and work together. After this, I wish you to serve me no longer. She felt the shock in her stomach before it got to her brain, and she pulled herself up to her feet, standing inches from Constantine. Edra? She demanded. And what else must I do that this child is supported? Her hand drifted to her stomach. I will take the child, raise it with the other royal children. He or she will be learning their culture, Constantine replied, seemingly with an answer for everything. Not everything, Osrith would learn, but that realization did not come until a good time into the future. Thank you, Osrith said, respecting her own advice to go with all that was happening. It is good of you. And that was when she caught a singular look in Constantine's eyes, one she would see again, but one she would not understand for a very long time. So, it is agreed? You will attend? Osrith nodded, and let Constantine guide her to a chair again, sitting down next to her. I have a proposal for you, Constantine told Osrith. She turned to look at him, shocked. No. The word was from her mouth before she could help it. He was proposing to her? She would never marry Constantine. The idea was absurd, even to keep the child at the palace. Was that what he meant? But the king of Alba sat still beside her, waiting for her to subside. Not I, Osrith, Constantine said, gently. I have a kinsman who has lands north of Bibbenberg, Constantine told Osrith. Large estates where he farms barley. You could go there, you would be Lacklands no longer, you could live in peace. And my child? Osrith asked the question, though her mind was shouting a refusal. No. She would not marry. Hadn't she told Domnall so, many times? The child could visit you, Constantine continued. He, or she, will have the best of a life here, with learning, with education, with warriorship. When she said nothing, Constantine took her other hand, running his fingers over the backs of her hands, like Osrith remembered he used to do to soothe Edra when she was upset. I was so furious, when you stood in my armor, when you took my place on the battlefield, Constantine told her. I was taller than you then, she remembered. And you fought, so well, so magnificently. You were not a 12-year-old girl, but a man that day. You hacked down 3 men including that one that was going for Domnall. Constantine chuckled, lightly. Let me do something for you. He glanced at her stomach. I can't take your place when you bring forth your child, but I can make your life more comfortable. He was a Constantine she had rarely seen. So often when she thought of him, Osrith remembered him as a whiffle prattling, busying her about, locking her out of the fortress, hiding her clothes, or taking her body before she had even known what was going on. It is something I could consider, Osrith said, without heart. She would not be parted from her child, never. I thank you, Lord King, she added. Do I look like Domnall? Constantine scoffed, looking away. He was your king, that is in no doubt. I would be content if you, after you have finished in my service, would consider me a coward. I can see that would be something to consider, Osrith replied. However, the man you have in mind, he is not the warrior who is the father of this child. That look again. Osrith tried to fix on it, to examine it, but all too soon Constantine had changed his face back to his usual form, unsmiling, but with an active interest behind his eyes. And this warrior provide you with a home? Security? My kinsman accepts the situation, accepts you as you are, Osrith. Constantine leaned back, letting her hands slip from his, and Osrith folded her arms, stubbornly. I have a home. Here, Osrith replied, stubbornly. Hadn't she given enough silver to the crown of Alba for that? Yes, now, Constantine explained. But one day I will die and I would not have my son, either of my sons, renegotiate your living arrangements. I do not see a convent life suiting you. He held up a hand as Osrith was about to protest. I would see you happy. I would see you settled, a union in the sight of God. He lowered his hand and took Osrith's, holding it tenderly, and they were children again. He was being conciliatory this time, rather than antagonistic, trying to do right by her, or so it seemed. Osrith nodded her head. "I will consider it," conceded Osrith, not meaning it in the least. "And I will go to Debut Bath, and Gloucester." Constantine took her hand and kissed it, then made to kiss her face. "Constantine." Osrith breathed, a panic setting in, for all their old feelings were rising in her body, and his, by the lump at her leg. "I am at an age where birth can kill me." She put a hand between them to fend him away. "Being active, with a purpose, is a help to me. But I cannot risk." But Constantine had moved away as quick as a whisper. "Consider the child my son or my daughter," Constantine told her. "As I consider Edra. Have no fear. The child can look to me for guidance, for safety, for instruction." His father, but Constantine shrugged her confession away. "Attend the Witan at Gloucester, find out as much as you can about Wessex and Mercia's interests in Debut Bath, in Hywel's lands. Edward is owed tribute, of some amount, I gather. What is the amount, and how long for? What form does it take?" Osrith nodded. "Stay for as long as you are able." He glanced to her stomach. "Report to me, then birth your child. Phelim and Engus will be with you. Their Cymric speech is similar to that Hywel speaks. It will add weight to your place there. But you need not go just yet. As Edra said, you have only just arrived. I will not have her upset by your leaving again so soon." "Anlaf," Osrith mused. "Or a son of Donchada." "Yes," Osrith nodded. "Please, make the arrangements. I will consent to whatever you decide." Not that she had much choice. Constantine had always been indulgent to Edra, and Osrith's authority mattered little. Which was why, no matter what Constantine planned for her child just then, Osrith would keep the child close to her, be its parent, properly, not abandon it to a royal court upbringing. And certainly not have Constantine adopt him. "Think on my proposal. The land will be in reach of your brother, Wigger, at Bibbenberg. You do not have to decide now." 88,888,888. It was the evening when Osrith found herself in the armory, looking at the stores, and what was available. Constantine had said to take what she willed, but Osrith knew there was no point taking too much. 4 of them, 4 horses, provisions for 3 days until they got to Glashku, oiled leather for canvassed sleeping. They had their own weapons. Osrith had her eye on a brown mare that one of the guards had brought in from Orun in the middle of the day, and Osrith wondered whether she would like to try her, or stick with Grey Shadow, who seemed to have a mind of his own, and would not go when she wanted him to, or would sometimes jolt her when he came to uneven ground. There would be a lot of uneven ground between Dunnottar and Glashku. Maybe the beast was older than he looked, maybe he was losing his sight, or was simply stubborn. As she was laying out the oiled leather canvases, a noise in the room beyond her made her start, and she found that it was Sainid, laying out newly forged weapons, and had dropped a reaping hook onto the floor. He smiled when he saw Osrith at the door. "Constantine has said I can take what I wish. Could you check to see I haven't missed anything? These days," Osrith broke off and put her hand to her head. These days, she could think that she had done everything, but found out nothing had been done, or sit down and her mind would wander. It was the pregnancy, Osrith knew, for the latest she had allowed a child to be removed from her had been the same months as she was now, and she remembered the feeling. After this time? That was something Osrith had decided not to dwell on. It was an unknown, and as such could not plan for it. The mission south would keep her mind occupied, at least, and Eswi had shown he was a decent man, she remembered Phelim. And Engus was a sworn Morma, a man who took the law as if he were the king himself to Strathclyde, an enemy territory to his own family. He had honor and reputation to consider. Sainid stepped past Osrith and went to the armory table, looking up to the door as Eswi stepped in. "Have you made the arrangements? Or is it Engus, seeing as we go to Strathclyde first?" Osrith asked him. Eswi looked at her, confused. "I was rather under the impression you were leading this mission, lady," Eswe replied. It was news to her, if leading meant she was in charge. In that case, begin with calling me my name, Osrith told them. I am not, and never have been a lady. A warrior, yes, Osrith added. She leaned to Eswe. Can I trust Dengus? And Phelim? Eswe reached to her hand, and suddenly, he looked familiar, like someone she had met before, someone she knew. You have put your trust in me, right enough, Eswe told her. They are as loyal as they could be. But if you have doubts, tell Constantine you will not do it. Tell him Hywil does not need to have Urian's line confirmed. Urian's line? And this made Osrith's mind work. The line of Coelhen. Constantine said something about your family? Your mother, perhaps? And realization flooded Osrith's mind. She had found her mother at Caeligwylid, when she had been in the scriptorium. Jaitha, her father's third wife, had been a direct descendant from Arian, the great king of Usht. So that meant Osrith, as well. She looked at Eswe. It will make a difference, to Hywil? Constantine believes so. Hywil is not a man easily impressed. But he respects, no, he fixes Cymru with Usht, for it was the beginnings of the Cymric in what the Say call Wallis. You and he are part of the same heritage. Then, yes, Osrith confirmed. I should go. And after that, with a stomach full of child. We leave the day after tomorrow, Osrith told Eswe. I wish to hasten to Wallis, and meet Hywil. I have laid out everything you need, Senid told her, as Eswe left, giving her a smile. I am glad you had me check, or you would have been short of bedding, horse tack, chewing hammers, pots, flint. I wish you were coming with me, she told him, flying to her friend, and Senid took her hand, gently. How can I trust these men? You can trust Eswe, Senid told her. You trusted Finolai all those years ago? Osrith nodded, as the image of Finolai, really Findle, now a monk at Caeligwylid, after everything, appeared in her mind. Then trust his brother. Eswe? Osrith found herself looking at the man's wake, at the door through which he had left and the courtyard across which he had walked. She knew she recognized something about him. The same gentle wit, the same humility, the same humanity. Phelim you know, and Engus is kin to Constantine. He is a good man also. If you are asking do I think you are safe in their company, yes, Osrith, I would trust you with them. But, as Eswe said, if you doubt yourself, should you be doing this for Constantine? Remember he was a little shite ass, who I had to beat round the head on more than one occasion. Osrith laughed, and dropped his hand. No, I can do this. I spent so long in Mercia, I feel like I have forgotten Alba. But Senid was not ready to let her go just yet, and he reached for her, pulling Osrith gently to him, before lightly kissing her cheek. We have not forgotten you, Osrith. 88,888,888. Edra was not in her rooms when Osrith went to find her, nor had Elasad or any of the servants seen her, but a wild commotion was coming from one of the lower floors, so Osrith went back down to find her daughter pummeling the grain sacks in the stores with a stick. She saw Osrith, and slammed a few more times into it, before dropping the stick, and gave Osrith a low, moody look, folding her arms in annoyance. Your father has told Ildub not to see you, Osrith said to her daughter, as she slumped down onto some of the empty flour sacks. Edra had been crying, her face was red and blotchy and tear-stained. Come here, Moelaine, Osrith encouraged, but Edra turned her head away from her, and sank her chin onto her hands. Osrith crossed to her, and sat beside her, half expecting Edra to shake her away when she placed a hand onto her shoulder, but she didn't. Instead, she sank her head back to Osrith's shoulder and let her adoptive mother stroke her hair. I would have rebelled too, if I were in your place, Osrith consoled her, as Edra sighed. I did do, I ran away from my home. You know that, I've told you before. Bibbenberg, Edra sighed. Several times. Do you understand why? Osrith asked her. So we do not spend time inappropriately together, Edra said. That is what Constantine said. Osrith didn't need an answer. It sounded like Constantine. Soon, you will get your monthly bloods. That is a sign that, Osrith began, trying to be the responsible parent, but Edra turned to her and nodded. Mater, I already know. Elasade told me, and I know my father has taken him away from me because he is worried I might become with child, but honestly, Ildub and I? He is a brother to me, like your brother is to you. Which one? Osrith thought, dully. And she added, Wea is a dear brother. And Constantine is considering a match for you. Edra laughed. Of course he is. She replied, then added, and why should he not? I did not say that, Edra Lane, she said, patting her daughter's hair again. Do you remember the story I told you? The story of the fire? Edra leaned out of her arms. My mother was burning in a house. You took her for help. She could not be saved. You adopted me and brought me to safety here. My father, she paused. I remember an old man, lying down. Is that all I've told you? When Edra did not reply, Osrith's mind raced. What did she know about Thyra's family? Come to that, what did she know of Biggers? Then listen, said Osrith, urgently. Listen to me. It is time you heard the whole story, and Osrith told her about her family, out of Hyabithu, in Denmark, how they had settled, killed many Saxons. Death to all say, Edru put in Gaelish, and Osrith nodded at the familiar refrain. And your family settled. My brother, my older brother was captured in battle by your grandfather, and pleased him so well that he brought him up as his own son. Ragnar the Fearless, Edra murmured. Yes, you remember? I remember some. Your mother's family's home was burned by another Dane, Kjartan, whose son had shamed your mother as a child, and your grandfather took revenge. Sven was his name, but then he captured and imprisoned your mother, for years and years. Then Osrith described how young Ragnar and Utad had raided Dunham and freed Thyra. Your mother and father found each other there, Bicca helped her find God, and peace. And you were conceived in love and safety in Wessex. She took Edra's hand. So, the Norse, the Danes ... all are your relations. I only ever met one other, Thyra's brother. Osrith remembered Ragnar the younger, tall, broad, fair-haired, fair, just, good-humoured, handsome. Not to wonder that Prida, wherever she was now, had loved him. All relatives of yours, Osrith persisted. Anlaf is a cousin of some sort ... You have such a culture to discover, Edra, she enthused, smiling at her. Constantine did not want you to be told yet, ever, I think, if he had his way. So when you go, you will still know him as Athair, and you will never forget Alba? I will never leave Alba, Edra said, stubbornly, folding her arms again. This is my home, Anlaf can live here. But Osrith shook her head. If you marry him, then no. You would go with him. He is trying to re-establish his claim in Eofic, as is another Norse Dane, Sitriger of Dublin. Anlaf is a good man, so Constantine says, and he would never say so unless he is sure. You are his daughter, Edra, the daughter he never had, more a child of his than ever Ildub or Selak. And then suddenly, Edra did a very un-Edra-like thing, she threw her arms around Osrith's neck and hugged her, hard and intensely, like she used to do when she was a tiny child. Oh, Mater, I love you so, she declared. That you saved my life, that you brought me here, I have never had an unhappy day, not really. Osrith laughed lightly into her hair. Not when you tried to jump into the Forth and swim alongside the boat to Culdees, and Senid fished you out. You were having a pretty bad day screaming and cursing at him with all the new swear words the fisher boys had taught you. She felt Edra cry giggle into her shoulder. And what about the day you came back in the middle of the night because you and Ildub had walked 10 miles west instead of east and you had lost a shoe in the mud? Edra laughed again, and looked Osrith in the face. Yes, it will all change now, and she looked at Osrith's stomach. And you will have a new child to care for. I will need your help, Edra, Osrith said, and you are always my daughter, and I will always be here for you when you need me. You were mine first. And she saw the girl's face lit up with the idea of a child, and put a hand to Osrith's stomach. I will be in the birthing room with you, Matt Hare, I will never leave your side. No, Osrith said, not that. I did not mean that, she insisted. Because Osrith would be out of control then, and would not be able to direct Edra, or protect her. You will learn to hold your brother or sister, dress them, how to tie them out of the way. What? Edra looked at Osrith with a frown. Swaddle them, and bundle them up, so they learn to hold up their heads and grow straight. Although I never did that with you, I wouldn't let you out of my arms for the first 6 months of your life. You nursed from me, I changed you, I was there when you explored. You slept beside me. Edra was looking at Osrith in wonder, and then smiled. Elased has said I can help, Edra told her. And Elased has birthed hundreds of babies, so she has said. You don't need to protect me, Matt Hare, I can help you. And Osrith looked at Edra, really saw her then, nearly old enough to marry, no longer a child. Since when did I get such a grown-up girl on my hands? Osrith asked, and this time pulled Edra to her. And, as to Anlaf, you do not have to marry him, even if Constantine says he is a good man. In fact, do not decide until the time, I may not even be here, if I am going away. Atair has never decided to send you to do something for you now, when you are with child. Edra asked, aghast. Why not? Osrith replied. It is not like I am going to give birth tomorrow, it takes many months until the baby is ready. 9 cycles of the moon, Edra told her. How many cycles has it been now? 4, Osrith told her. And that had been her limit. Osrith had never been pregnant for longer than 4 months. It worried her, the loss of independence, the loss of her freedoms and, a reasonable risk of loss of her life. Osrith wrenched her mind to Edra as a thought crossed her mind and she looked at Edra. Has Constantine told Ildub that he must not see you beginning immediately? And she watched her daughter's beautiful face light up like a day in high summer. Edra shook her head, then slowly got to her feet, realization filling her mind. Enjoy yourselves, Osrith called, then added, and don't get into too much bother, or Constantine will be wanting to speak to me about it. From down the corridor, which led to the stables she heard her daughter call, We won't, Matt Hare, we won't.